Hey Claire, I'm just going to give you a quick run through of how to start editing your bone piece in Zbrush. So when you launch the software, your screen will probably look like this, or possibly there'll be a menu open that looks like this. If this menu is open, to close it, you just press this button that says Lightbox. If you open the software and there's nothing in this workspace, like there isn't this sphere, you can also, under Lightbox, double click, for example, this Dynamesh sphere project, just double click that, and it will load it into the space. To start with, I'll tell you a little bit about navigation. So I said earlier that there's kind of a few ways to navigate. So the one way to do it is to use these icons in the toolbar. So if you hold down on move and drag, it will move. If you hold down on zoom 3D and drag forward and back, it will zoom. If you hold down rotate and go to the left and the right, it will rotate. If, for example, you accidentally zoom really far in, if you press the frame button, it will sort of center the object in the workspace. So these can be quite good to start with for navigating, using these icons here. There's a similar set of icons just above this scroll, zoom, actual, and half. These are actually zooming in the document. So you see this kind of rectangle here. If you're using these icons, you're actually moving or zooming the entire document workspace, whereas this one is zooming in on the object within the document. So I would say, don't avoid doing anything with these ones. If you accidentally use it, just set it to actual. But yeah, don't bother using these ones. These are the ones that are actually affecting the object in the space. Yeah, so we can always zoom out like this. You can also use this head. This is good for locking in on a certain angle. So this is like the front, the side, the top. Obviously we're looking at a sphere, so it's not so helpful. But this can be quite a good way to kind of lock to a certain angle. The second way to navigate is kind of by dragging within the workspace. So I've got my Wacom pen set up. So if I just drag in the grey area, I will be rotating around the object. If I hold down the Option key and I drag, I will pan around the object. And this is probably the quickest way to rotate and to pan. However, to zoom, you have to hold down Option, press down on the tablet with the pen, and then with the with the pen still held down, if you release the Option key, you can then zoom. So to repeat that again, it's Option, press down, release Option, and then you can drag. This is a little bit awkward when you're first using Zbrush. So what I'd recommend for you is use the dragging in the dark area for rotating, use the dragging and the Option key for panning, but for zooming, I would suggest use the zoom button over here on the side. And yeah, obviously if you're really zoomed in and you want to pan, use the button here as well. But I think when you're working at a distance like this, I would use the kind of dragging in the dark area to rotate. If you drag on the object, you'll actually make a mark on it. Yeah, so that navigation only works if you're off the object. Yeah. Same, if you hold down Option over the object and drag, you'll also still mark the object. It's only if you're in the dark grey area and hold down Option that it will actually drag. Yeah. If you do anything that you didn't mean to on the design, if you just press Command Z, it will undo. Yeah. And you also have this timeline at the top, and that will save a certain number of steps. Yeah. So you can also use that to navigate back and forth. Okay. That's probably the best kind of intro to navigation. Hopefully that will help you with that side of things. In terms of importing a file and working on that, if you go up to the import button in the corner here, press that once, and then select your file, press open. You'll get a little pop-up menu, just press OK. and it will load your object into the build, into the into the document. So again, you can just drag around to view it. If while you're dragging you press shift, it will lock the view to a 90-degree angle. So if I'm like panning around and I press shift, it will like lock the view. I can also get more of a locked view by dragging on this head. So that's quite good if you want to look at it from a very like straight on angle. When I first import an object, I like to orientate it in my workspace. So the first thing I like to do is switch off perspective mode. And then what I like to do is use these move, scale and rotate buttons to position this in a way that makes sense for like editing it. So what I would do is drag and press shift to lock from a top-down view. Then I'll take the rotate tool. And this little thing that appears is called a Gizmo 3D. I'm actually going to make a note to send you a video specifically about the Gizmo 3D that talks about it in more detail. I actually think that video is listed on the kind of Google document that I sent you. So the first thing when we're using this is to make sure we have symmetry switched off. So you see how there's kind of 2 red dots visible. If you press X, that's a short key for turning symmetry on and off. So if I press X again, you'll see that red dot appears. If I press it once more, it disappears. So it's really important when we're like rotating and stuff that we don't have symmetry switched on. The way that you use a Gizmo 3D is that you have these like outer edges, you have these arrows, and you have these boxes, and they all do different things. So for rotating, we're going to use the kind of outside circles. So for example, if I click on this and drag, I can begin to move the shape around. And again, if I move and press shift, it's going to lock it to like an angle, yeah? So I might do something like this. And then I might change my view to the front, use the outside angle to straighten it up a bit. Maybe I'll turn to the side, press shift, straighten it out a bit, just to get it kind of uniform in the workspace. If I'm actually going to do a lot of edits to the front and the back side, I might even consider just flipping this kind of forward. Now, at the moment, my gimbal has kind of gone a bit off kilter. To reset it, I just press the unlock button and reset. I can also press this go to unmasked center if I'm worried that the gizmo's moved, and just lock it again. So now you'll see it's like nicely orientated on the object. And then I can again drag this, press shift, lock it in a nice position. That position might be better if you're planning on doing kind of edits to the front and back rather than having it flat, but it's kind of up to you. It's whatever makes sense for the kind of sculpting that you're going to do. Again, I'm just going to check it from the front. I'm using the floor as a kind of guide. And I maybe, again, just by eye, just going to tilt it a little bit. Okay. And I would suggest, yeah, like do all your adjustments from a straight on view. So if I'm like this and I'm turning something, it's kind of hard to know really how accurate it is. So I always would adjust it from the side, adjust it from the top, etc. Yeah. If I wanted to scale something, I could do that with these cubes, but actually for what I'm showing you now, I don't think I'm going to confuse you with explaining the whole Gizmo 3D. I think I'll send you that video and it will become super, super clear after you watch that. So for now, I'll just show you exactly what you need to get started with editing this. So when I'm happy that I've positioned it nicely, I switch back to draw mode. Okay, and then I could, if I wanted to, start using my brushes and stuff like that. But what I want to do first is to check the surface of my model. So if you press polyframe here and then zoom in, this is actually showing us the kind of surface of the design. And it's a very dense kind of array of like small triangles. So this is called a triangulated surface. And it's actually a pretty decent surface for sculpting, but sometimes with triangles, when you move them, they can deform in quite strange ways. So if I take, for example, go into the brush menu and select, let's go for the move brush. When I start to move this, you can see that the triangles begin to stretch and break, yeah? You see how they're kind of like, kind of getting stretched out. If I switch off polyframe mode, that's also kind of visible in the actual surface of the model, right? So if I go back a few steps by dragging here, you can see that the triangles kind of like break. So what we want to do is switch this from being a triangulated surface to a surface made from four-sided shapes called quads. And to do that, we use something called Dynamesh. So if you open up this geometry menu, you will see this Dynamesh option here. It might be orange, it might be off. So for now, I'm going to switch it so it's off. If your one isn't orange, you don't need to do this step. Yours might just look like this. So then what you want to do is switch this down to 0, set this to, let's try 400, and switch off polyframe, and just press Dynamesh. We'll give it a moment to process. And you can see now that the surface has turned from triangles to quads. So triangles to quads. We've lost a little bit of definition. So what you can do is go back a step, and then rather than it being 400, we can select 600 and press Dynamesh again. Cool, this looks a lot better. I think we lost less detail there. Yeah. And again, if we look at the surface, before it was triangulated, now it's a quad. And then what we can do is, if we use the move brush, we have a lot more play before the shape begins to break. And if it does begin to break, so if it does begin to get these faceted edges, all you need to do is switch Dynamesh off and back on, and it will reapply that quad surface. Dynamesh is the most important, like if anything is sort of clear from this video, Dynamesh is the most important thing to understand. Dynamesh stands for dynamic mesh, and it's what makes Zbrush a sort of sculpting software rather than a modeling software or like a box modeling software. It's the fact that you have the ability to infinitely kind of stretch a surface and be able to kind of add more geometry as and when you need it. So you kind of have like infinite clay in some sense, yeah? So that's a really important feature to understand. So you import your object, orientate it in the space, and then apply a Dynamesh. Resolution is a little bit tricky to understand because it's not really a real world resolution that I can like compare it to dots per inch or anything like that. It's to do with the actual document, and it varies from object to object that you import. I often try a resolution of 400 and then I adjust it from there. So if 400 doesn't give a clear enough result, I'll normally increase it by increments of 100 or 200 until I get like a sort of similar surface to when it was triangulated. Again, this is a little bit complicated to understand, but I think because you're going to be using this object to start with, just go for 600 because that worked nicely. So now we have our nice object with Dynamesh switched on, and now you can actually start to use the brushes. So if you go into the brush menu, there's loads of different stuff to try out. The main brushes that you'll use are probably like the ones here at the top. So you have like clay buildup is quite popular. So you can like draw with that, and then if you hold down shift, that's smooth, yeah? So build up, smooth out. If you hold down Alt or the Option key, so it's Alt if you're using a Windows computer or Option if you're using a Mac, Alt will always invert the brush. So if not pressing it adds clay, pressing Alt or Option will subtract clay, yeah? So it's the same brush, but one is adding, and then with Alt or Option selected, it's subtracting, yeah? And then always using the Shift key to smooth. And you can adjust your brush size. So if I've got the shift held down, for example, which is my smoothing brush, I can adjust the brush size by dragging here. I can also adjust the intensity of the smooth here. But yeah, that should be pretty good for like smoothing stuff out. Yeah, just have a play around with the brushes. So I really like obviously using the move brush. It's like pretty cool. You only need to Dynamesh when things start to get really stretched. So I wouldn't bother Dynameshing now. I would only Dynamesh if things start to like look a bit fragmented or fractured. You've also got things like the trim brush, so trim dynamic. This, I would make this maybe a little bit smaller. This one is quite nice. You can get quite like nice faceted edges, and again using smooth quite a lot of the time in combination with whatever brush I'm using. Again, if you make it quite large, yeah, you can get some quite nice edges. The pinch brush is quite nice. If you click on the brushes, so if I wanted to use a pinch brush, I could press brush and then press P, and it will show all the brushes that begin with a P. So I could go for pinch. This one's quite nice because you can use it to like sharpen edges, for example. Obviously this is a really organic shape, so it doesn't really have sharp edges, but yeah, you could use it to kind of create sharp edges if you wanted to. I'm going to send you another video as well about hard surface brushes. They're not so good for organic shapes, but they're good for like creating like clean forms. And then you could also use, for example, the flatten brush, so brush palette and then F for flatten. Select the flatten brush, maybe increase the size. Again, this is quite good for like creating flat, kind of flat surfaces. And again, holding down shift and smoothing, like it's normally a combination of like one brush and then smoothing. You can change how the preview material looks. So if you press the material button, it gives you a little preview. So yeah, you can change your preview material. Just keep working. That one's a little bit hard to see. I mean, I find the matte cat grey is kind of okay. Another thing you might like to do is subtools are kind of like layers almost. So you could have your original and then you could duplicate that and you could work on a copy. So you could switch off the visibility of the original one and you could even rename it. So if you have the first one selected and press rename, you could actually call it like original. And then if you go down to the copy and switch off the original, now you're working on like a copy. Yeah, so let's say we work on that. Let's say you did something you didn't like it. You could switch back to your original and work on that one. And it's all about what is visible with these little eyeballs. Yeah. Another thing you might want to try is working with the deformation menu, which is this one. And this has quite a lot of fun stuff that you do with just like sliders. So you can basically just drag sliders and it will like affect the shape. Avoid breaking the mesh like this. You see this is now like super broken. So avoid doing anything like that. But like a little bit of, you know, inflating or deflating is not a problem. You've also got, yeah, there's like loads of different ones that you can play around with. And you can also adjust these by adjusting what axis they're affecting. So at the moment, this is spherizing across all axes, but you could actually switch, you know, two of them off with these tiny buttons, and then it will have like a different effect. So again, yeah, you could play with these, twist along a different axis. Yeah, you can really start to play with these. Yeah, save as you go, and again, there's loads of different ways to save. You've got like save here, export here. You've got a save under document. Don't do any of those. If you want to save, go File, Save As, and that's going to save you as a project file, a ZPR file, and that's what you want to use when you're just saving the document. Yeah, when you're saving the project, don't save under document. And don't save under the tool menu. Save under Files, Save As. I think that's about it for now. So just to recap, import your STL, orientate it using the rotate. I mean, whether you click rotate, scale, or move, it's the same gimbal. So I don't even know why they bother having those three buttons. Use the Gizmo 3D to manipulate it and move it around. Perform your Dynamesh using the Dynamesh menu, which is under the geometry. Set it to 600. Press Dynamesh. Make sure you have blur switched off, and then yeah, you can start using the brushes, and you can start using the deformation menu. Yeah, once you've got stuff that you're happy with, drop me an email and I can talk to you about how to export it. And yeah, if you have any other questions, just let me know.